My Hero Academia, All Grown Up. Chapter 12. The party took on a different note as the night aged. After all the important people had gone, Edshot had encouraged his employees to have fun. They did deserve it after all. The music had changed from classical to a modern beat, and the ballroom took on new life with more drinks being accepted from the waitstaff, and some even decided to dance. Uraraka found herself struggling to make conversation with the hard-headed blonde that she had found herself with. They had moved to stand at one of the cocktail tables, and she had been obliged to receive a second glass of wine. "So," she asked with a light tone, "are you doing anything fun this weekend?" Bakugou tossed her an annoyed glance. "You tend to ask me that a lot, round face." "Ugh," she rolled her eyes. "We're back to nicknames, huh?" "We never left," he replied sourly. She took a long drink of the wine in her hand and savored its buttery flavor. "So are you going to answer the question, or are we going to keep standing here in silence?" Bakugou smirked to himself at her forward candor. She'd had some champagne and was on her second glass of wine now. It explained her new attitude. "The fuck do you want me to say? I'm not going to be braiding anybody's hair over gossip, if that's what you're asking." She stifled a laugh into her glass. "I don't know." She felt a surge of bravery. "Kirishima does say he loves girls' night." Bakugou stiffened with irritation. "Don't go thinking that you're clever, round face. You're not funny at all." Well, it seemed to work. She leaned her elbows on the cocktail table and clutched her glass with both hands. "I do have a question, though." Bakugou knew he'd regret what he said next. "What the fuck is it then?" She smiled sweetly. "Have you always been able to act so polite? You were quite the gentleman around Kamui." Bakugou wanted to slap himself for his stupidity. He never should have brought her that drink while she was talking to that stick figure. Now, she had something to pester him about. "I don't do polite, round face. It's called being professional." She scoffed and leaned off the table to take a drink from her glass. "Call it whatever you want, but I say you were being very polite. You should act like that more often." "And have a stick up my ass all the time?" "No thanks." Bakugou's expression held the same bitterness as his tone. She giggled teasingly as she looked at him with bright eyes. "PSH, you practically invented being a tightwad." Bakugou was floored by her honesty and was also a little surprised by her wittiness. "What the fuck are you trying to say, round face?" She placed her glass on the table and planted her hands on her hips. "I'm just saying you should try being more polite." "To who?" Bakugou fired back. "As far as I'm concerned, I'm only polite to the people I respect." She rolled her eyes. "To me, silly. To everyone. Don't we all have your respect too? TSH." Bakugou scowled. "Lower-rank heroes don't deserve my respect." The blonde's words stung her. It felt like she'd been backhanded, but she didn't get the opportunity to express her hurt before Kirishima walked up to them. His shirt was half untucked and his blazer was missing. "Weo," he huffed tiredly as he stopped at their table. "Whenever I need a good workout, I'll just go to Mina's for a dance-off. That girl has stamina." He breathed heavily and nodded his head toward the pink girl dancing with a group of their coworkers. "You look like shit," Bakugou announced as he observed the redhead before him. Kirishima shrugged and waved down a waitress. "If you're so tough, why don't you go out there and try it yourself?" "I'd rather die," Bakugou retorted coldly. Uraraka cleared her throat and brushed a lock of hair behind her ear. "I'm going to get some air." Kirishima blinked at her disposition and nodded. "All right. Want me to tell Mina?" She shook her head. "I'll only be a minute." She took the opportunity to walk away hurriedly, and Kirishima watched as she headed toward the balcony. What was that about? He turned his attention to the blonde beside him. Bakugou swirled the cup of whiskey in his palm. "Fuck if I know." Kirishima ordered a whiskey for himself as the waitress finally arrived and returned his questioning gaze back toward his friend. "What were you guys talking about?" "She was trying to give me shit," Bakugou frowned, "but of course she didn't win." Kirishima looked unamused. "So you made fun of her?" "Why the fuck would you think that?" Bakugou glowered at his red-headed friend. Kirishima gave a massive shrug. "Probably because you always resort to going too far when people make fun of you," says the guy that looks like he's crashing the fucking party. Bakugou downed the rest of his whiskey and savored the burn in his throat. Kirishima nodded knowingly. "My point exactly." Bakugou slammed the glass down on the table between them. The fuck do you want me to say, dumbass? I give everybody shit. Yeah, well, sometimes. Kirishima slid the empty glass away from Bakugou so that the blonde wouldn't inevitably smash it. Your shit-talking turns into real shit-talking. It tends to actually hurt people's feelings. That's a fucking relief. Bakugou rolled his eyes with annoyance. Thanks for the reassurance, dipshit. Do you really think I don't know that? Kirishima shrugged again. That depends. Did you intend to actually hurt Uraraka's feelings? She looked upset. She's not upset, Bakugou growled. She wasn't fucking crying or anything, so what's the big deal? You are so fucking stupid sometimes. The redhead breathed hopelessly. It's a miracle that you can tie your damn shoes, Bakugou. Bakugou contemplated strangulation as his method of torture for his friend. Kirishima had gotten too used to his insults by now, so physical abuse was the only sure way to enact revenge for that comment. Fuck you, Kirishima. No. Kirishima straightened up as his glass of whiskey was delivered. Fuck you, Bakugou. You're too big an ass sometimes, and Uraraka doesn't deserve your dickheadness. Maybe Mina was right about you. The blonde watched as Kirishima threw back the whiskey and dropped it on the table. He wasn't sure if Kirishima was angry with him or just giving him shit as usual. What the fuck is that supposed to mean? Kirishima gave Bakugou a serious look. You tell me. If you like that girl, then start acting like a man and stop being such an ass. If you don't, then quit pining over her like the hopeless idiot you are. Bakugou flexed his fingers. If you're looking to fight, then we should take this outside. Quit avoiding the question, Bakugou. Kirishima began tucking his shirt back in. You can pretend that you don't want her all you want, but you have to decide. Uraraka is too sweet and too cute for a jerk like you, but I've had your back. Now it's time for you to decide. I won't tell you what to do anymore, dude. You're on your own. The blonde felt rage flare up in his gut. I'm happy to kick your ass right here and now. It doesn't fucking matter to me, so maybe you should decide. Kirishima smoothed out his newly tucked-in shirt and frowned. I'm not going to fight you, dude. You're my best fucking friend. Well, you don't fucking act like it. Bakugou grit his teeth angrily. All right. Mina suddenly appeared and patted them both on the shoulder lightly. We definitely don't want to make a scene. She smiled sweetly at the few other party-goers that were scattered nearby before she yanked them both toward her. What the shit are you two boneheads doing? Bakugou pulled away sharply. Fuck off, Pinky. Kirishima eased himself from her grip. Bakugou and I were just having a heated discussion about our dear sweet friend Uraraka. She crossed her arms questioningly. Oh yeah? What were you guys having such a heated discussion about? Didn't I just tell you to fuck off? Bakugou fired back at her, his rage unquelled. I was just telling Bakugou that he should be mindful of what he says to her. Kirishima shrugged slowly. I'd hate to see him offend her. She picked up what Kirishima was putting down, but she wasn't so kind about it. She turned to glare at the blonde furiously. What did you do? Bakugou clenched his fists. What the fuck? I'm out of here. He turned to leave, but Mina grabbed him by the blazer and reeled him back in. You're not getting out of this one so easy, explodey face. She narrowed her eyes at him. He snatched her hand and threw it off of him. I'll fucking fight you too, Pinky. Guys. Kirishima breathed hotly. Didn't we just decide that we wouldn't cause a scene? If you won't tell me, Mina turned toward Kirishima, perhaps this one will. The redhead raised his hands defensively. Hey, I don't know any more than you do. All I know is that Uraraka hurried out of here quick and Bakugou said he had been giving her some shit. Giving her some? Are you serious? She turned to glower at Bakugou. Have you learned nothing? Bakugou glared maliciously at the pair. Why the fuck do you both seem to care so much about what I say to round face? Because you dolt. She slapped her forehead with the palm of her hand. You have a giant crush on her, and you're blowing it big time. What? Do you want her to go back to Deku? Go back. He felt his first question slip out, and he rushed to repair it. And I don't fucking like her. Why the hell does everyone keep saying that shit? Listen up, Mina glared back at him. And listen good. She pointed an accusing finger at him. I don't like this at all right? I do not support this crush by any means. Deku is a damn saint compared to you, but it's painfully obvious that you're crushing on my friend. Shut the hell up, Bakugou started, but Mina rudely interrupted with the same threatening tone. I'm not done. She kept her voice low to keep from drawing spectators. You need to get your shit together or you're going to hurt that poor girl. If she leaves Deku for you, and you break her heart, well, you won't want to know what happens then. I think that's enough. Kirishima lowered Mina's hand and coaxed her to relax. All we're saying is that you have to choose. Either go out there and fix what you did or leave it to us. But if you don't do it, then you'll lose any future chance with uraraka. Bakugou glared harshly at both of them. What the fuck is wrong with you people? Both Mina and Kirishima sighed with indignation, but Kirishima was the one to speak. So, what's it going to be, Bakugou? Are you going to go after her, or not? The blonde felt the expectation of their gazes on him, and he turned his glare to the doors of the balcony. Had he really upset uraraka that much? He mulled over the conversation he'd had with her before Kirishima showed up, and after a minute of thinking, he was beginning to realize where he'd gone wrong. But that wasn't even his biggest problem right now. He was on blast by the two idiots in front of him. What the fuck kid of ultimatum was this anyway? It actually felt more like an intervention, and that boiled his blood enough to blow steam out of his ears. He wretched his hands, and they felt sticky with sweat. It was a feeling he was used to, but this time it felt different. They were more clammy right now. Was it nerves? That couldn't be right, he never got nervous. He scanned the room before his glare fell back on the door to the balcony. Uraraka had said she'd only take a minute, but a significant amount of time has passed since then. It did seem like a rather long time to get a breath of fresh air. Bakugou. Kirishima finally broke the silence. The blonde tore his gaze from the door and glared at the two morons before him. Where do you two get off acting so high and mighty? You know what? Mina shook her head and crossed her arms. Forget it. Kirishima, and I will go talk to her. Why don't you just go home, huh? Fucking can it, Pinky. Bakugou didn't break character. I do what I want. He glared at them for a moment longer before he turned toward the balcony. Damn it, he better not regret this. Mina and Kirishima watched the blonde stalk away. He looked like a kid with a bad attitude, but that was the Bakugou that they knew. What do you think? Kirishima asked as Bakugou left earshot. Mina blinked, unconvinced by Bakugou's intentions. I think he'll blow it. Actually, I hope he does. Kirishima chuckled. Sometimes you have to play hardball with Bakugou. Maybe that's something Uraraka will learn in time. The pink girl scoffed and watched the door close behind Bakugou. You act like she's already left Deku in the dust. He still has a 50% stake in this battle. My money is on him, even with his sorry ass in America. Kirishima waved the waitress down again. Well, you're forgetting one thing, Mina. The most important thing. She turned to give him an unimpressed look. Am I? And what would that be? Kirishima ordered them a round of drinks before smirking at her. Bakugou never loses. The night air had a nip to it, and Bakugou took it as a sign that fall was coming soon. The city beneath him was a familiar sight and sound as he walked up to the railing and breathed. He needed to relax. He'd gotten way too heated with Kirishima and Mina, and he'd come close to blasting them off. The balcony was mostly empty aside from a couple that was huddled together on the railing. He turned to look at them coldly, and they stared back at him. Fakof extras. His words were laced with intent. Both man and woman looked surprised by his words, but they decided against challenging them. They whispered to each other for a moment before moving to go back inside. Bakugou glanced around the balcony and spotted Uraraka further down it. She had her elbows on the railing, and she was standing on one foot, her shoes on the ground beside her. He leaned against the railing for a while and looked at her. What does he say to her right now? He wasn't entirely sure how he'd fucked up yet, but he had a vague idea. But the overpowering feeling he felt was humiliation. This shit was embarrassing, and he hated that more than anything. If he went to talk to her, his pride would be very wounded. But even if he backed out, Kirishima and Mina still knew his original intentions, and that was humiliation enough. Unable to form a coherent plan, Bakugou figured he was running out of time to do so. He always did things better when he winged it anyway. He slowly approached her and cleared his throat. She blinked and turned to see who was there. Bakugou? He shoved his hands into the pockets of his slacks and meandered up to her with a nod. She fell back onto both feet and turned toward him. I was only going to be a minute, but this view is amazing. He turned to look down at the city, but the noise of traffic and people was slightly drowned out by the sound of the music inside the ballroom. Yeah, he forced the word out unenthusiastically. I'll be back inside later. I just need a few more minutes. She leaned back on the railing and looked down. You don't have to check on me. I wasn't. He clenched his jaw as he finally stopped a few feet away from her and rested his hip on the railing. She looked the tiniest bit annoyed. So what then? Did you come back out here to give me a harder time about my hero ranking? Don't worry, I got the message the first time. He breathed out a sigh of indignation and closed his eyes. Fuck, round face. I didn't mean you. She scoffed and decided against a reply. He let the awkward silence hang for a moment, hoping she'd say something to fill the void. At least it would be something he could build off of. When it never came, he fought to keep the conversation going. Damn it, you already had my respect. She leaned off the railing and knelt to pick up her shoes. Well, that would be great to hear if I believed you, but I don't. I'm sorry, bakugou, but I think I'm going to head home now. Stop, he commanded with a more direct tone. Please. The plea took her by surprise. It was a strange word to hear his voice say. The most shocking aspect was his sincere tone, so she complied and halted her departure. She let her eyes fall on his face expectantly. He watched the shoes sway in her hand before he looked at her face. She looked like she was trying to be angry, but her eyes looked tired. He should have known better than to insult her in the first place, and it was a lesson he was having a hard time learning. I suck at giving apologies, all right? But... He looked away and toward the city's skyline. I'm sorry. She sighed softly and closed her eyes. No, you're right, bakugou. She shuffled her feet awkwardly on the cold concrete. I should earn your respect. Maybe one day I'll have it, but I need to work harder. If only I could work harder. Her voice fell to a whisper. Would you quit the poor me act for a minute? Bakugou felt the rage he had previously harbored rear its head again. You're wrong, all right? You've earned my respect already, and the same goes for anyone else. You worked just as hard, if not harder, than a lot of us in high school. It's hard not to respect that. She almost laughed at his comment. Well, that's all well and good, but that was 3 years ago. I've done nothing but sit around since then, so maybe I am nothing more than a low-rank hero. You shouldn't respect me, and I don't want your pity. She moved to leave again, but was stopped once more. Bakugou reached without thinking and grabbed her by the elbow. He gruffly turned her back toward him, aiming for a gentle touch, but delivering one that was far from it. Damn it, round face. I don't pity you. You're too proud for that. It's not worth my breath to lie to you. She pulled her elbow from his hold and took a step back. It's funny to hear you preach about respecting me when you can't even call me by my name. Bakugou was at odds. How does he deal with this? His snarky comebacks didn't seem appropriate right now, and he didn't know how to fix this without them. For fuck's sake, I tease you because you make it so damn easy. She shook her head incredulously. What do you really want, bakugou? If it's an apology, then fine. I forgive you. No, he replied, unsure of what to say. Well, yes. I wanted to apologize. All right, she nodded sharply. Then we're done here. I have to go. Uraraka, he snapped. Stop trying to run away. She closed her eyes with frustration and breathed slowly. I'm not running away. I just don't have anything else to say. Well, I do. He took a bold step forward and closed the space between them a little more. He tensed as she looked up at him with widening eyes. She was much shorter with the shoes off, and he trained his eyes on hers. What? She asked quietly, afraid to move away from him. He broke from her gaze and shifted uncomfortably. He dug his hands back into his slacks and opened his mouth hesitantly. Fuck this. This is stupid. He finally looked at her again. I think you're strong, all right? You want to make a big-ass comeback, and I respect that. You don't take shit lying down, not even from me. It's hard to not respect you, but I don't think Deka does. She paused as she drank in his words, but only one question floated into her mind. What do you mean about Deko? Bakugou was really regretting his decision to wing this now because he really didn't want to bring up that shit nerd. It's no secret that I fucking hate that guy. Bakugou began sourly. He's a goddamn kiss-ass and a pretty boy, but I respect his hero status. He seems to respect everyone but you, alright? He treats you like a fucking pet. She was taken aback by his bold observation, and she felt a flush of anger. What would you know about Deku and I? I know that he drove you to beat the living snot out of a punching bag, Bakugou retorted with equal fire. I know what you told me that day too. That he thinks you're some helpless girl that can't walk down a fucking street without being in danger. That is the Deku that I don't respect. She glowered at him. Well, don't act so high and mighty. You told me that I was insecure, and I couldn't do better on that same day. Which I made up to you, he pointed out right away. I fucked up, and I have already admitted that shit to you. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I appreciate that, Bakugou, but I still don't understand what you're trying to say. Bakugou shifted uncomfortably as she reopened her eyes to him. What the fuck does he say now? Was there anything he could say without coming off like an ass? He was at a loss for words. You just what? She pressed harder. Her limited patience was beginning to fade. I get it, okay? You respect me. All is forgiven. Damn it, Uraraka. Bakugou snapped harshly. It's more than that. She recoiled slightly at his tone. Then what is it, Bakugou? What do you want? Her voice went quiet and took on a more defensive tone. He ground his teeth in annoyance, and he looked away. He didn't have words for what he wanted to say, because it was still unclear to even him. Instead, he decided to take action. Uraraka didn't expect Bakugou to close the space between them and grab her hand. She was pulled into him, and his other hand rested on her waist. What are you doing? She was flustered for words. Relax, he grunted and began to sway to the muffled sound of the music inside. Drop the damn shoes, will you? She froze up in his grasp before she gingerly dropped the shoes on the ground, thankful that they didn't float away instead. She wasn't sure what to do next, but Bakugou did the thinking for her. He lifted his hand from her waist to carefully place her hand on his shoulder before he returned his own to its original position. Just follow my lead. She was tense in his grasp as he awkwardly swayed with her. Bakugou, what's going on? He grit his teeth and kept his gaze away from her curious eyes. He fought for the words. This is what I wanted, damn it. A dance? She asked dumbly, and she tried to match his swaying form. The blonde was beside himself with humiliation. Of all the things in the world he could have picked, this was by far the least manly in his eyes. Yes. The word was so forced, even he had to rein in a wince. All right, she murmured with a confused tone, and she tried to focus on matching him. Why a dance? What was with her, and the 20 questions? Bakugou forced himself to swallow his pride. An apology wasn't enough. She cracked a tiny smile. So you went with a dance? How polite. He felt a twinge of annoyance seep into his chest as he picked up the speed of their sways to match the muffled song better. You're pushing it, Uraraka. Her smile grew a little more. So, I'm Uraraka now, huh? Well, I'm happy to keep calling your round face. Bakugou fired back. But you're the one who complained about it. She giggled faintly. I did, didn't I? He bit back a snide remark and settled with focusing on the song and the dance again. He swayed simply with her as it played through the walls of the hotel and barely made it to the balcony. The breeze tickled his hair, and the smell of the city wafted with it. She tensed with the chill, but she hoped he wouldn't notice. There was something comforting about this moment they were having together, and she didn't want the night air to be the thing that ruined it. However, he did notice her slight shiver, but he didn't pull away. If you're cold, why didn't you think to bring a coat? She rolled her eyes at him. Honestly, I thought I'd be home by now. Besides, I didn't know it would be this chilly tonight. It's August, he stated bluntly, and slowly swayed them in a circle. She glanced down at her outfit and sighed. Well, I didn't really have any coats to go with this dress either, so it just seemed easier to go without. Bakugou blinked to her through his guarded eyes. That's a fancy dress. I didn't think you owned anything of that caliber. She intentionally stepped on his foot and tossed him an unimpressed look. It was a gift. And you should be happy I'm not wearing those shoes because your foot would be hurting a whole lot more if I were. He smirked back at her defiant glare. Your feet probably hurt more just from wearing those damn things. She shrugged in his grasp as he circled them around again. They really aren't that bad. They're just difficult to walk in. I don't usually wear heels. Well, you look good. Bakugou felt the words drop from his lips, and he immediately clamped his mouth shut. He tore his eyes away from her in embarrassment and tried to find somewhere else to put them. She was happy for his reaction because she had blushed at his forward compliment. Thank you. Bakugou swallowed the awkward lump in his throat. For fuck's sake, don't ever fucking mention this. She laughed airily, and they both heard the song draw to a close. She reluctantly allowed him to pull away from her, and she occupied herself with putting her heels back on her feet. I should probably head home. He grabbed her clutch bag off the ground for her and held it out. Same here. I'll walk you home. I was just going to go with Mina, she shrugged. She has a bunch of stuff in my place. Bakugou rolled his eyes at the mention of that name. She's a little bit busy getting chummy with that smart-ass Kirishima. His dumbass will walk her back, so don't worry about them. She furrowed her eyebrows at his words. All right then. Shall we go? He pulled his blazer off and handed it to her. After you put this on, I won't be responsible for you getting a damn cold. She eyed the coat skeptically before she reached for it. Thank you. She rested it over her shoulders and pulled it closed in front of her. Let's go. He held the door open for her before they crossed the ballroom for the exit. He intentionally avoided eye contact with Kirishima and Mina from where he'd left them a few minutes ago. He was sure they were watching them both closely, and it made his blood boil again. Uraraka smiled as they exited to the street, and he let her lead the way. Perhaps this party had been more than just a work opportunity. It was beginning to feel like much bigger opportunities had presented themselves. Welcome to Haneda Airport. We welcome you to Tokyo, Japan. Deko sluggishly rode an escalator down to the exit of the airport. He'd taken a red-eye flight back to Japan for a few days. It had been an exhausting ordeal making this spur-of-the-moment trip happen, but he figured it would be worth it. Uraraka had been very short with him for the last few weeks, and she only seemed to get worse by the day. She kept insisting she was all right and that everything was going great, but he was doubtful. She hadn't been her normal cheery self at all. He missed seeing her smiling face and her rosy cheeks. He could only hope that this short trip would give him the opportunity to work things out with her. His mother had suggested the trip after he'd shared their troubles with her. She had claimed that a grand act would help him repair their relationship and open the door to new possibilities. His mother loved Uraraka dearly and was thrilled that her son had chosen well. It hadn't been a year into their relationship before she started pressuring him to pop the big question to her. He had resisted, citing his developing career. But right now, he wished he'd listened to her. Maybe she would have come to America with him if they were married. Uraraka's parents were also fond of the relationship. Uraraka had never failed to mention how much they adored him. Their dinners at her parents' house had gone as well as any of them had hoped, and they had always marveled at his great success for his age. But as he exited the airport and waved down a taxi, he couldn't help but be somewhat worried. Was he making a big mistake by coming back unannounced? He doubted she'd be mad, but she may not be ready to talk yet. He got into the taxi with his duffel bag and gave an address for a local hotel. It was the middle of the night, so he'd stop in the next morning. Hopefully, the next day would pan out well for the both of them. So that's it for today. If you liked the video, leave a like, subscribe, and activate the notification bell. And if you want to contribute to the entire story being illustrated, just read the information in the description below.